Okay, we're live. Thank you. We can start.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. Those on the continent of Europe and in its vicinity, and for those in the States and elsewhere, good morning. I guess good morning. Okay, let me briefly introduce the School of Materialist Research platform itself, and also present our speaker this evening, and then I will give the floor to Anne-Françoise. Okay, the School of Materialist Research, or SMR, is an education and research collective that offers intensive study courses, seminars, special programs, and research initiatives that address the materialisms running through contemporary science, philosophy, art, mathematics, design, architecture, and politics. SMR was founded by the Center for Philosophical Technologies at Arizona State University, the United States, the Institute of Social Sciences and Humanities in Skopje, the Department for Architecture, Theory, and Philosophy of Techniques at the Technical University Vienna, and the Critical Inquiry Lab at the Design Academy Eindhoven in the Netherlands, and serves as a global hub for education, research, and experimentation at the intersection of the humanities, social sciences, creative fields, and the STEM sciences. It's been run since its inception by myself, Katerina Kolozova, Adam Nowicek from Arizona State University, Iris van der Tuin from the Critical Inquiry Lab at the Academy in Eindhoven, who is for the time being taking a temporary break, and also Vera Bullman, the director of the Department for Architecture Theory at the Vienna University, Technical University of Vienna. So this is the platform. As for the variety of programs, you can check them out on our website. In the meantime, let me just briefly present Anne's talk. It's abstract, basically. As for Anne-Françoise, I'm sure that all of you present here know enough, and it will be too much taking of your time if I present her enormous over, basically, and the philosophical and scientific importance of her work. You can check out her short bio among the visiting faculty of SMR. Here is the brief introduction or an abstract of her talk. So the author and the philosopher, the concreteness of philosophical writing, in philosophical invention, what is the part in philosophical invention? What is the part of knowledge and the work of writing? Is there not an author in the subsoil basement, to use Dostoyevsky's term, that philosophy tends to deny for the sake of objectivity and transparency in the order of reasons? The project is not to put subjectivity in philosophy, but to manifest something in the philosophical invention through two eyes, that of the philosopher, or selves, that of the philosopher and that of the writer. The concreteness of the writing would consist then in the amalgamation, concrete cum cresco, in Latin. I am growing by amalgamation on an elementary gesture of an elementary gesture in the logos, trace of the human in the philosophy. So this is the brief intro, and now I give the floor to Anne.
Thank you very much, Katrina. If I chose the concreteness, it is because it is a school of materialism. This is the choice set. The following reflection is quite complex because it interrogates philosophy on a concrete end that we have qualified by the integrative object. Integrative object between the philosophy and the philosophies. The integrative object is an object without synthesis, and it could be put into relation with other disciplines through operators, as I will speak about later on. Speaking of writing requires us to pass through the distinctions between language, style, and text, and the generic process. Here, it is not a matter of discussion concerning the primacy of the signified or the signifier. We mainly support ourselves on Laruelle's idea of placing language and the drives in relation. We articulate all these notions and scales by invention within philosophy, which is our guiding problem. I will attempt to illustrate these difficult questions through the fragments of an imaginary dialogue and some citations from independent artists, independent of philosophy as well. However, we will return to philosophy to demonstrate how its invention and writing requires us to modify the relationships of philosophy to the real. As we know, Laruelle distinguishes generic human and the subject taken up within the world. The question of the author and the philosopher is not a direct illustration of this fundamental distinction, but we will cross it. We propose a passage or journey through Russia, a place that has developed this theme as much in literature as in philosophy. The concepts. Invention in philosophy is my guiding problem. How does one invent within philosophy? Often, critique allows us to find a defect in one philosophy, elaborating something that locates this defect and allows us to repair the system otherwise. It is as if we know that inside one philosophy, we can find other possible ones within it. Critique makes us see that the philosophies that came before are like a field where, as said Hegel, all cores are gray. However, critique is a poison. But why? It aims at one philosophy to determine within in that which does not function. Critique is a rather poor vision of invention. I have developed the idea that invention could be elaborated within a conception of the de jure, and not only de facto, multiplicity of philosophies. I love all philosophies. This does not presuppose any critique, but the joys of the multiplicity of cogitos and possible space and of thoughts, multiple combination with other disciplines or other practices. This is what I have called the pragmatics of philosophies, as in François Laruelle fashion in a biography of ordinary men, and not a pragmatist philosophy. This pragmatics is a transcendental experiment. Therefore, what bonds are there between the de jure multiplicity of philosophies, is experiment, and the concretude of writing? As soon as we conceive a de jure multiplicity of philosophies, experimental and fictional use are possible. They bring all at once into play the author and the narrator, the author and the philosopher, and probably the conceptual personage that Deleuze suggests. We generalize the author-philosopher distinction to every philosophy, not as a fact, but as a tool to manifest the multiplicity of cogitos and the necessity to presuppose a generic space for philosophy. Many reflections on this journey have its origin with a shared work between Maryse Dennes, a specialist in Russian philosophy, and myself. For 30 years, Maryse has organized encounters between French and Russian philosophers, alternatively at Bordeaux and at Moscow, and she's currently writing the narrative of this adventure. To her, this narrative precisely recreates the distinction between the author and the narrator. We know that Russian philosophy and literature have understood writing as a polyphony. Don't forget that the icon is not an image, but a writing that God places within man. The idea of this journey is bound to the reading of Dostoyevsky's Notes from Underground, a book written when he left the labor camp. It is there that Dostoyevsky distinguishes between the narrator, the author, and the idea. Narrator, citation. We are oppressed at being men, men with a real individual body and blood. We are ashamed of it. We think it a disgrace and try to contrive to be some sort of impossible generalized men. We are stillborn, and for generations past have been begotten, not by living fathers, but that suits us better and better. We are developing a taste for it. Soon we shall contrive to be born somehow from an idea, but enough. I don't want to write more from underground. The author, the notes of this paradoxalist do not end here. However, we could not refrain from going on with them, but it seems to us that we may stop here. We could provide philosophical translations to this text in a way like a treatise of passions. One may say that philosophical writing emerges from an equivalent to a treatise of passions, where the philosopher can be weighted down by the author. For me, I have studied the relation between rhetoric and philosophy a great deal, and I have placed the sufficient metaphor and the function of the example into relation assumed to unveil the new thing or the thing as it is. Between the two, what is a writing? What is a common equal X that gather philosophies within philosophy in the singular? Rather than the fundamental idea of the philosopher who does not write, as Socrates, I have proposed the fiction of the philosophy who does not speak. Is this silence the silence of the human or the philosopher? We have to swap places between the philosopher who does not speak and the one who renounces opinions for philosophy and the writing of the icon. The question is not religious. It concerns the invention of philosophical writing and therefore the place of the philosopher. Another aspect allows for the exchange between Maryse and I. Both of us think that there must be a point of exteriority to writing. The text is not the rule. This point of exteriority is for me that which allows for the implantation of our concepts into a layer close to the real, and what can undo the system of oppositions, what I call the axiom of the implant, bound in its own way to the unilateral duality. For one Russian philosopher, it is hesychasm that construct an asymmetry between the name of God and God itself. Hesychasm is a prayer of the heart. We repeat the name of God. We repeat, and now God is here. The name is God, but God is not the name. Hesychasm has allowed authors such as Alexei Losev and Pavel Florensky to have a point of exteriority that allows them to be immersed within any such disciplines: mathematics, philosophy, mythology, theology, sciences, electrical engineering for Florensky. For Florensky, mathematics are a habit of thought, close to philosophy, but philosophy is not mathematics, etc. Lyudmila Gogotishvili has brought hesychasm and the unilateral duality of sound and phoneme into relation. Sound is a phoneme, but the phoneme is not a sound. Please allow me to cite a non-real or imaginary dialogue between François Laruelle and Lyudmila Gogotishvili, written for a Muscovite colloquium in honor of the latter. She's dead now. It's terrible. A dialogue that was translated into English by Sylvia Nambiar and preceded in Russian by Maryse. Lyudmila, I have read some of your texts with a certain passion because they bring me closer to some Russian philosophers, Alexei Losev in particular. But I think that you don't see the importance of language in your own writings, or that you minimize it at least. François, it's true that I have spoken of the text more than language. To me, language does not suffice, no more than the world suffice. Since my first writing, I propose an evaluation of linguistic elements in terms of drives rather than the signified and signifier in the déclin de l'écriture. And the drives are already written. And the linguistic elements should be seized as specification of drive. One cannot therefore test language without linking it to the unconscious. This first exchange between Lyudmila and François suggests an articulation in various steps of philosophical writing. There is language, within which Lyudmila already sees the formation of the unilateral duality. Language is a given for the philosopher who makes use of it. There is what I call style. It is this approach that is still close to the drive, this sort of open secret that each individual cogito offers to the other. Style is not the enemy of the philosopher. Style is the use of language. It engages an individualized approach and allows one to treat language, that is, to no longer make it into an authority inside philosophy. There is the text that is led by a writing guided by a teleology, whether it is literary, technical, religious, philosophical, ethical, etc. In the text, writing is taken up inside a complex structure. There is the author and there is the poet who relates language to its most originary aspects. There is the novelist or the philosopher who plays with language to make it into a text. The author transforms language into style and into posture. The philosopher makes language into a text compatible with philosophical ideas and structures. The text is analyzable no longer solely in drive and rhythm, but also as the effect of rhetoric, which is itself a use of language style. Rhetoric is written, imposed by discipline. It is a mixture between style and teleology, or again, it is the scaffolding that allows one to get the text to its best expression. The text is an intermediary between language and philosophy. The text is inhabited as much by rhythm and drives, but also by an ensemble of transcendent rules that may come from music, literature, philosophy, and so on. These distinctions take account of Ludmilla's exegesis, but they also take into consideration François' refusal to explain the text by signified and signifier. In analyzing literary text, the distinction between author and narrator is a classical distinction, but not in philosophy, where the control of the system, its objectivity, and its seriousness require the fusion of the author and the philosopher. Explicitly distinguishing the two would be one way of bringing the system itself into play, even if implicitly the philosopher can feel that this distinction forges their text. Return to the question of invention, taken more broadly with artists. Let's write this, the question of invention, that is, in the moment, the point or the peak of invention. See the rhetoric of Balthazar Grassi, who has manifest this peak, and the way in which creators speak of invention, not only in philosophy, but also in music, poetry, etc. It is a moment where they live their patrimony and dress in a new way with authority, even before and during conceptualization. In music, there is, for example, the composer Pascal Dussapin, interviews, the one where he teaches us that invention comes with joy and that joy escapes from the greatest melancholy. Citation. When a bird flies, the ear is divided around it into thin meshes. Each of its invisible traces produces other ones, and other ones then generate fine chains of wheels. Just like these whirlwinds of air, composing is to rejoice in this infinite movement. And he had, once again, I see how the outpouring of joys is produced by an extreme melancholy. In literature, let's take one poet's perspective, the one who sees life even in the world. I will say something from a poem by Victor Hugo. He said, for world, let it be known is living being, car le mot qu'on le sache est un être vivant. C'est dans les contemplations. Ou again in Derrida, words are therefore unleashed. They enrage the dictionary. Les mots sont donc déchaînés. Ils enragent dans le dictionnaire. Ça, c'est donc là, traduit Klang. Ou en philosophie, once more, François Laruelle. To invent is to overthrow authorities to conserve and multiply the flows, and to give a status to individuals independently of philosophical rules. To invent is to make individuals of the living, the ones capable of melancholy, the cave of Plato, enjoy the universe of quantum, make use of language as written and drives to construct a text with new rules that destroys authorities. This has been the case since the beginning in Laruelle's main thesis, General Economy of the Effects of Being, Économie générale des effets d'être, which is in progress of being published by Jordanko-Sekulovsky in Japan. Taking up the Laruelle-Gokotishvili dialogue. Lyudmila, I would just like us to deal with language otherwise, not as an intermediary force of communication or mediation, but as a force of invention. We can go from language to mythology, from language to polyphony. You know the use that I make of the works of Losef and Bakhtin, who I knew very well before reading you. Regarding Bakhtin, I spoke of unilateral dialogism, and I did indeed emphasize the energetism that Losef's and your work suppose. This force of thought, as you say, belongs to you. François, there, I comprehend you better. You do not, unfortunately, know the continuation of non-philosophy in non-standard philosophy. The serpentine line, dear to Ravesson, becomes more vertical there in En dernière humanité, la nouvelle science écologique, and in Tetralogos, an opéra de philosophie. The ecology that stands horizontally around the earth bores me profoundly. One must give it another dimension, and in Tetralogos, which is a climb from the cave to the stars, where the metaphor is transformed into the téléphore. Téléphore avec PH. Philosophy is lived in the insonorous or soundproof beauty, bella sonore, with the help of the quantum, a science without a natural object, but that is intimately linked to the real. And the generic as inchoative syntax and melody. Then philosophy becomes paramusical, comes back in a soft descent onto the human giving in a musical sense or meaning to thy lived. The transcendental is none other than the human voice. It's only in this latter sense that the emanation of the one can be comprehended as descendant, as you were suggesting concerning non-philosophy. There is thus the human voice is the heart of philosophy. Now, the practices of invention, broader with artists. What are the devices for invention? First, the function of unknowing in invention. Unknowing is a principle of causality in Tetralogos. Therefore, the cloud of unknowing is a true transcendental imagination, the mystic dissolution of unity or the original synthetic unity of reminiscence. And in the work of Dussapin, there is some strategies of ignorance. Ignorance is close to a deliberate construction that is necessary, he said in the interview. For Jérôme Guiton, a writer who is a friend of artists, the invention for him is projected by whole ridges, mists, chasm ridges, aesthetically distant experience underlines the relief of my closest experience. The hilly landscape of writing is shown upon by distant art. Conversely, our own journey in literature may shine upon some other distant ground. A sculptor can certainly envy a writer. It is for an exhibition by John Cornu, Muriel Mambrini-Doudet et Yvan Liovik Ebel. Absence, survey, vision from a distance, lack of visibility as a factor of invention. Or there is a method, not method of invention, invented in the School of Mines in Paris by Armand Hatchuel. It is the method CK, concept knowledge. Choose in philosophy a concept, n'importe lequel, Earth, liberty, Simperton line, world, universe, etc., and put them in relation with philosophical knowledge or thought for other concepts. This is possible because concepts are vessels between the a priori and the empirical, according to an idea of the biologist Muriel Mambrini-Doudet. Or another device for evaluation, the question of unconscious. Written drives that have a tendency to undo ready-made authorities. Written precedes the authority of language, putting back into place what seems to be established as authority. Pascal Duciapin said, "It's undoubtedly because I am trying to do something that touch it. It is unconscious. At the moment, I am attempting to find a point of weakness, of collapse, to release what resists to reach the lower strata of consciousness, so that is fragile, defenseless." And Victor Hugo, after the world as a living being, for word, let it be now, is living being. The dreamer's hand vibrates, trembles to write them. His very pen, shed from a wingspan, cakes on the page when these characters come out. Words, figures, terms of dubule origin, visage of the invisible, shown by the unknown. Made by womb, shaped by womb, sprung from the shadows, rising and falling in our somber heads, finding the suns as the water finds the level, formulae of the brain's fluctuating light. It's an official traduction by Blackmore. Et Duciapin had for invention, we have sparkles, crisis, flash. And Duciapin cites Victor Hugo, music is a noise that thinks. La musique est un bruit qui pense. Voilà la définition par Victor Hugo de la musique. La musique est un bruit qui pense. Return to philosophy. In philosophy, the question of writing was regularly approached by the means of rhetoric and its critics. There is a critique of rhetoric in all of classical philosophy. It is generally said that this critique allows a transparency of the order of reason to the real. But here, it will be shown that it is the negation of the author in the philosopher, and that his negation, or this denial, is a manifestation of the will to master the text. Let's therefore treat writing as concrete, something that expands but by amalgam between the author and the narrator, between the human and the philosopher. And in the practice of rhetoric, where is the denial? It's not quite that of style, which is then categorized. Atticism or Asianism in antiquity for at least 6 centuries. It is not that of the rhetorician who affirms themselves as such. It is rather the I of the author, human or philosopher, who is carried away by the movement of figure. But there is now a necessity of rhetoric, not only critique, but necessity. We know that the philosopher cannot directly see truth. Plato told us already how we must not turn our head away before its metaphorical equivalent, the sun. According to Hans Blumenberg, a German philosopher who constructed a metaphorology, there is an impossibility to see the naked truth. It is the title of one of his works, La vérité nue. Therefore, veils and diversion are necessary. And it is in philosophy that these veils and diversion can be the most visible and problematic, provided one knows how to distinguish the author and the philosopher. But how to measure the figularity of a philosophical text in such a way that it does not disturb the objectivity of the text and its transparency to the real. Reinterpretation of rhetoric by the catachresis. The identification of rhetorical terms is possible by the supposition of a degree zero, and this degree zero is the catachresis. Nietzsche, on Truth and Lies in a non-moral sense, teaches us that the state of catachresis comes afterwards, and not at the beginning, when the metaphorical term has been forgotten, like in the expressions leaf of paper or foot of the table. We can then understand the terms as that which distinguishes itself from the degree zero and can be evaluated according to distance, or according to Derrida, to a distance of distance, or a find of finds, or that assumed pure state of the text confused with the order of reasons. Does this mean that the philosopher writes according to this degree zero to preserve objectivity, respect the real, and that the author, without truly realizing it, would add figularity? Or rather, does this mean that the author remains on the minimal of I, who does not play a role? Or does it mean they are just the one behind the sense? Does this mean that the philosopher makes use of terms that philosophy allows them because the philosopher would be at the level of the text and of argumentation, not only of style? Perhaps there is no definite decision of this point. Perhaps it would be a mistake to want to decide. And the degree zero, as a result of the catachresis, is probably not exactly the naked truth of Hans Blumenberg. In all cases, we find ourselves in a situation where all decision led to dead ends. We cannot say that in the oeuvre of Nietzsche or in the oeuvre of Laruelle, the poem is the fate of the author, and philosophy the fate of the philosopher. We say instead that living in philosophy, making it something of the order of the vital and the lived, even if we seek to reduce it, makes us introduce the author and the philosopher to each other. In Laruelle's works, the lived takes primacy over the authority of language. So, transformation of the rhetoric by polyphony. There is polyphony. It's an idea of Bakhtin. We know that there are numerous threads in this tangle, but we do not know how to give a name and a definitive identity to the threads. The problem is the same concerning models. There are multiple for the same phenomenon, and we cannot know which is the right one without producing a false theory. see Henri Poincaré and Richard Feynman on this point. Wanting to identify a single thread here does not lead to a false theory, but without a doubt make a novel out of a text that refuses to be one. In literature, the I multiplies itself between the author and the narrator. Without this, the text does not hold. It's just a curtain over what it would like to manifest. In philosophy, where the mastery of a system matters, the distinction is much more subtle and secret. It is felt, but little made explicit, because it seems to call into question the seriousness of philosophical writing and relating it to a subjectivity which does not concern it. Reprise of the de jure multiplicity of philosophies. We have seen that the de jure multiplicity leads to an experimental pragmatics of philosophies. It supposes that philosophies are hypotheses, philosophizing from hypothesis and with hypothesis. This idea, already expressed by Leibniz, allows us to give another flesh or a new dimension to the notion of the author and of the philosopher in philosophy. We transform the author-philosopher couple. I call the author an obscure cogito, in reference to the generalization made by Malebranche from cogitos to feelings. I call philosophy an open secret. It hides nothing, but there remains in it some secret of its transcendental experiment, as soon as one admits the de jure multiplicity of philosophies. Obscure cogito. What remains of the cogito when we no longer use the hypothesis of God? Nothing lights it from the outside. It's no longer an icon of the philosopher. It's just their style, so something always remains hidden. We can never unravel a style completely and give it its combination or chiffre. We can approach it, but it remains a black and opaque mark. It remains perhaps an I, the one which the whole world believes it recognized. It is only the contingent underdetermination of any oeuvre. Its analysis reconciles it with a collective of I's, that of other philosophers, but not only them, with all the ones who act and think without hierarchical distinction. The links between the obscure cogito and the open secret are not confused with the structure of philosophy, duality, and the transcendental. They bring a completely different color to philosophy. Do these transcendent rules allow passages between disciplines? Can we pass from literature to philosophy, from music to philosophy, or from philosophy to music, as Laruelle does in his opera Philosophies? This is supposed to break the rules that endlessly modify the text. Mutation of language in tetralogos. Laruelle, who admits all these modes of invention, what we list, goes further in the tetralogos. He explains that non-philosophy supposes a mutation of language and even, citation, a conversion of entangled relations of the concept and art, as troubling as a religion's conversion. A quantum-type mutation of relation of sense and the agreement of the signifier. In some ways, a quantum teleportation of language by the imaginary world in another agreement destined to break its linguistic sufficiency. This conversion is enabled by the overhand determination by the quantum. Rather than a discourse or a language, we have a teleforcing ou téléfortation, téléforçage. It's an idea derived from the forcing of this discourse that puts in relation with quantum real. It is no longer a simple language. It is entangled with the lived result of subjects. Rather than a linear sequence, we have a scene interpretable in painting, in literature, in architecture. Citation. The stage and music director are like the architect of an oeuvre that is, like all oeuvres, the repetition of a fragment of the world, capable of producing the unexpected quantum effect of the universe. There is a stage director, there is an architect, who both are like the author of the text, rather than the narrator. Here, it is no longer only a matter of polyphony, but of transformation of language rendered insufficient by the lived experience of subjects. Here, the multiplicity of eyes is effective, and it is no longer necessary to invoke authorities. Now, a tentative of characterization of philosophy. What can we say about philosophy? Let's translate and continue with Dussapin. Philosophy is a thought that multiplies like a wind after the flight of a bird. That of the whole Sova in Russian, that signifies wisdom and gives us the names of Sophie and Sonia. It is a game and a regulated flow of concepts that divides itself between an a priori and empirical and construct in its thought its one double and its circularity what any new philosopher seeks to break and transform it in an equivalent of the transcendental. If we put ourselves inside of this characterization, we find Hegel and his followers once more. But if we assume an author, an obscure cogito, it is possible to consider philosophy without the return of an authority over the other disciplines. With the distinction of the author and the philosopher, there is no longer need of a philosophy of techniques, philosophy of religion, etc. In Slaruel's usage of the quantum, there are operative relations between disciplines. It is a transformation of invention in philosophy, not surveying or the least possible of it, but instead the introduction of operators that the combination with the quantum allows. I will then say of philosophy in the singular that it is one silence that believes it can speak through the intermediary of philosophies. We have here the distinction of the author and the philosopher, or better, the distinction of the obscure cogito and the open secret. Or again, that philosophy inhabits one world while at the same time simulating other. The relations between philosophy and other disciplines are then made by operators, virtual, fiction, future. See in the generic epistemology of Muriel Mambrini-Doudet and I, change of scale, creation of fiction, invention of a future philosophy and not a philosophy of the future. Conclusion, how does this conception of the concreteness of writing change the creation of philosophy? Writing is not a text, it's a process, as well as a generic space. It's a movement in this space contingent but necessary for creation. This process revitalizes philosophy while rendering its causes contingent. But then the philosopher takes on another stage, not only the author, but also the one who renders philosophy concrete and alive. But the philosophy is not longer an I, and even less a me, which Russell says must die in philosophy. The Polish philosopher Katarzyna Krzywoszynska gives an ethical value to style. Style is itself an ethical posture. As for writing, it is a process that precedes a treatise of patience, that of the human as well as that of the philosopher. How does our construct such a treatise of patience? What will be its effects on philosophy and its writing? Such are the guiding question of the journey of which this text is an introduction. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anne. It was brilliant. As always, and good to hear a word or two on Dostoevsky, even more increasingly so, even more often so. We will have a couple of classes on Dostoevsky by Yulia Kristeva in the intensive study course at SMR this fall. Okay, just a side note. Okay, let's give the floor to everybody present in the Zoom. And Zach or Rista, maybe check the stream on YouTube, because some are following there, like Jack Segbert, and he said he might have a question there. So check the Segbars. So check the stream as well.
Yes,
in the meantime, yeah, let's start with the Zoom room. Does anybody have a question?
You see, you have two leaves in the discussion on actors and characters, and on structure of the talk to help the discussion. In the chat.
Yeah, I cannot see them. Have they been posted?
Yes, yes. In discussion, I add author and characters and structure of the talk to help.
Okay. Okay. Out of all of these non-philosophers here, Orwellians, Schmidians, etc., is there nobody who can say something?
It's not only Laruelle, it is a broad dialogue between a lot of philosophers and with writers and artists.
Yeah,
it's
that's obvious. That's an added aspect of it. Okay, I had a Orwellian question, but let's keep it for later. First, let's see if somebody else wants to say something. Lista, have you checked the stream?
Yes, there is no question there.
Okay. Okay, let me ask a question. I've been wondering about the epistemological background, let's say, of the talk and discourse on the multiplicity of selfhood, of the multiple I's, selves. How does it relate, according to you, to Laruelle's notion of the radical subjectivity, and further on to the human in human, insofar as an instance where we might place le vécu as the instance of the real. This is, of course, oversimplifying a thesis and a method developed throughout many, many books. I'm just simplifying the talk for the sake of the conversation. You see where I'm going. So this radicalization of the self, this minimization, let's say, of the self, this underdetermination of the self, etc., this minusculization of selfhood that usually non-philosophy goes in the direction of, is there, and it's juxtaposed to the discourse on the multiplicity of selfhood or multiplicity of eyes in philosophers and authors subject position, let's put it that way. So how do the two poles correlate with one another, if they do at all?
Yes, thank you very much. It is an immense question, but I think that I said this evening is compatible with your response, your answer. I think the distinction between human and subject is very fundamental. We can lose our structure of subjects, but we are always a human. I think it is very important. And when I talk of I in philosophy, it is the I of the subject philosopher. The I is not in the generic name, but when the philosopher who do not speak, it is difficult to decide if its silence is the silence of the philosopher or of the human. It is a distinction very, very important. And so what I appel here the I, because it is the text and the style. The I are not only in the world, they are aleatory subjects. And these aleatory subjects give us the idea that there is a multiplicity of philosophies. With the multiplicity of philosophy, I add intermediary axioms of the non-philosophy of François Laruelle. But I think it's not, it's compatible. It's intermediary axioms. Not necessary, perhaps, for the construction of the non-philosophy, but necessary to describe the contingency of the decision of each philosophy.
Yeah, I agree completely. I was just curious how it works, but of course they're compatible. It would be ridiculous if we were all, reduced to this solipsistic real and real, or human and human. I agree entirely. I don't know if the others have a question. I just have a short follow-up question. If you have a moment, you mentioned in the last instance we remain human, and that's what's at stake in this entire discourse. What's your position on post-humanism?
what is my position on?
Post-humanism.
Oh,
Post-structuralist, post-humanist discourse.
I think that when we have a multiplicity of right,
Mhm,
when we forgot one
mhm.
or several, so emerge an ideology. So ideology is necessary. We cannot separate. But this ideology is not for me philosophy. It is an interpretation. It's an interpretation because we cannot think all the multiplicity of philosophy together.
I agree. Okay, Etienne, Bruce. Etienne, unmute yourself.
Oui, voilà, je pense que j'ai le micro maintenant. Je pensais à une citation du chanteur Philippe Léotard qui dit j'écris pour me taire. Et je me demandais si, en fait, pourquoi est-ce qu'on écrit et pourquoi est-ce que l'auteur écrit et pourquoi est-ce que le philosophe écrit. Et peut-être qu'on a une indication là avec un auteur, un poète, qui dit j'écris pour me taire.
Oui, so it's very important this idea because when we create new concepts in philosophy, we supprime in some way the philosophy. We have a new object and the philosophy is in the horizon. Why we write, I think it is a lot of reasons, but these reasons are linked by the lived of the subjects. For some, it is a necessity, a survival. For others, it is the description of the current world. Oh, it's a lot of problems. But text is a construction. As if you see the Comédie humaine de Balzac, Balzac a dû chercher 2000 names for the characters. 2000. Qu'est-ce qui l'a poussé à faire ça? Ses promenades dans Paris? Ou est-ce qu'il faisait ses promenades dans Paris pour chercher des noms? Il y a là une ambiguïté qu'on ne peut pas défaire. C'est quelque chose, c'est le open secret de l'expérience. Mais il n'est peut-être pas nécessaire d'écrire, il n'est peut-être pas nécessaire de faire de la philosophie. Hein? Chaque vie a sa valeur. Alors,
Merci.
écrire pour se taire, I think it is a very interesting expression. Very interesting.
Merci, Anne-Françoise.
Anybody else?
I also have a question.
Okay, Anna, go ahead.
Yeah, it's a question, actually even two questions. One is about this idea of style and style as something useful to the philosophy. I also have met this idea of Laurel already about the style of thinking, and I was wondering how close this idea to a little bit similar idea of Deleuzian image of thinking, image de la pensée, and Foucauldian idea as well of maybe not as similar as the delusion, but about esthétique de vivre, aesthetics of living.
Yes.
Is it really close, or there are some important distinctions here which I haven't
I
got?
think it is a lot of possibilities. This talk is a possibility centered on style and text, but we can have a tradition in images, as Bruno Cani, for example, in Paris, made as a philosopher artist. Or we can articulate this writing with the history of the thought as Foucault. But it is a great work of Elizabeth, who shows the importance of Binswanger for Foucault. I have not the name of Elizabeth now, but I will with you a work on this. And Binswanger permits to Foucault to made Husserl remote. Husserl was in all introduction, first introduction after rewriting by Foucault. But after, with Binswanger, he have a phenomenology without transcendental. But there are mutation of translation, and translation add always something new. Where Elisabetta Basso, yes, it's Elisabetta Basso. Yes. Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you. Basso.
Mm-hmm.
She's Italian from Dolomites. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you, Anna.
Yeah, also one more question about the transcendental. This phrase, can you a little bit clarify for me this phrase about the transcendental is no other than the human voice, but it's not about human and human, right? Because human and human, it's not the transcendental order as far as I know. It's because transcendental, it's already philosophical, right? So it's not. I mean, it's not immanence radicale when we speak about transcendental already.
Yes.
But in what sense it's a human voice? Can you explain a little bit, please?
Yes, it is because in Tetralogos, Laruelle searched to transform philosophy in music. And there are a lot of stages. These stages are described with the link between a scientist and a philosopher.
Mm-hmm.
And in this stage, he transformed philosophy in a sort of music. And so the transcendental, it's not immanence, it's a human voice. But there are a lot of stages for this.
Okay, I see. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anna. No questions, comments? Let me check the stream.
There is nothing, either Facebook or YouTube.
Okay.
Juste un mot pour dire
Let me
que
close the stream.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. I accidentally opened the stream. Yes, Etienne.
Yes, I just want to add, excuse me, I could not speak English properly, so I prefer to explain myself in French.
Okay, continue in French.
Je voulais juste dire que la voix est, enfin, c'est juste un rappel, la voix c'est comme une empreinte digitale. C'est-à-dire qu'aujourd'hui, on se protège des ordinateurs, enfin, on protège notre identité de toutes sortes de façons possibles, aussi bien numérique que dans la vie de tous les jours. Mais il suffit pas, quand on fait attention à ces données personnelles, il suffit pas de se méfier des images, mais il faut se méfier aussi beaucoup maintenant, enfin se méfier. Et est-ce qu'il y a besoin de se méfier? Je ne sais pas, mais en tout cas, la voix, c'est comme une empreinte digitale. Ça, c'est l'identité de la personne, la voix. Enfin, c'est une façon d'exprimer l'identité d'une personne et une façon de la retrouver, évidemment, également. Voilà, c'est tout
Oui,
ce
ça
que
va
je voulais dire.
avec les sujets aléatoires. Oui, et la multiplicité des I. It is a very interesting. There is a very good paper in the review Labyrinth of Ivan Karenova on the voice of François Laruelle by Gilbert Kiefer.
Oui,
On the voice, precise voice of François Laruelle.
Okay, so Etienne's comment was basically that there is no, correct me, Etienne, if I'm not summing up correctly, because I will sum up. It was long and I can't remember it word to word, but that there is no like opposition or contradiction between the mediation of selfhood, of whatever the immanent self might be, the voice or the real or whatever, and let's say digital manifestations or digital subjectivizations, that the digital is also a plane where where the immanent can like materialize itself. Let's put it that way.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
So,
okay. Yes.
Okay, we're close to the end. If any final comments, questions before?
I think Jeremy has a question. He raised his
Okay.
hand.
Hello. Hi, Anne-Françoise.
Hello, Jeremy. Hello.
Pleasure to be here.
A translator of the conference.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to hear you speak. And we've been talking about this in private, but I thought we could talk about this together in the group setting. I wanted to ask you about the relationship between author and authority. So we've been talking about this, that there's an etymological link between author and authority. And in French, instance, insofar as determination Antonia instance, is about authority in a way, like a judgment. So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about some of the ambiguity that appears in the word of the instance in connection to authority on the one hand, but also, is there a sense of authority that is irreducible to authorities with a capital A, as in a biography of ordinary man, there's minorité, minorities and authorities, right? Because there's a link between author and authority in the auteur for etymology, is there a sense of an author without authority, or a mixture of authorship and authority in the sense of a given without givenness, or donner sans donation? Could you say a little bit more on that, perhaps?
Yes. You are right. Author and authority are the same. And I made the hypothesis that if we made the distinction between author and philosopher, we can destroy this authority. As in the Économie générale des effets d'être, qui n'est pas encore paru. Mais Économie des effets d'être is a book with a movement, with topoi, with movement, and a machine to destroy the identities. Laruelle explains that Russell and Heidegger have the speak of philosophy, but this is with the authority of given notions, as I, as conscious, and so, etc. And he overthrew these authorities. So I think I made the hypothesis then to distinguish author and philosopher can destroy this sufficiency of the author. Voilà, it's an hypothesis.
Merci beaucoup.
Okay. Is there any final comment? Question? If not, I'm assuming Anne is already tired, as she should be, as it expected to be. So thank you, Anne, for this brilliant talk, as always. Thanks everybody for attending here in the Zoom and on the stream. And see you, hopefully some of you, tomorrow for Patricia McCormack's open seminar, which is also here in Zoom online at the same time. Okay, thanks again, and good night. Good evening, everybody.
Catherine,
Oui.
Est-ce que tu acceptes que je mette ce texte sur le site de l'ONFI?
Bien sûr, oui. Oui,
Bien sûr.
pourquoi pas. Oui, bien
Hein?
sûr.
Pourquoi pas? En mettant que
Ok.
c'est évidemment une conférence pour
Ouais, bien sûr.
l'école matérialiste.
Oui.
Nouveau matérialisme. La New School of New Materialism.
D'accord, oui, oui, ça serait excellent. On pourrait lier les deux sites ou Diane pourrait mettre là un lien qui irait à la vidéo de ce séminaire.
Très bien, très bien.
De ce soir, alors on peut le regarder aussi, la conférence.
D'accord.
À travers le site de Amphi.
Pas de problème.
Ok, d'accord. Ok, merci à tout le monde. Au revoir. Okay,
Merci à tout le monde.
Ciao, ciao.
Merci, ciao, ciao.